Clara Mercer pressed her grandmother's silver brooch against her chest and stepped down from the coach onto the gravel drive of Thornwood. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. 3 days ago, she had buried the only person who ever loved her. 3 hours ago, she had opened the letter her grandmother kept under her pillow for 9 years. And now she stood before a house that had been waiting for her, though the man inside had no idea she existed. If you want to know what secret brought Clara to this door, subscribe to my channel and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's story travels tonight. The summer heat pressed down on Virginia like a hand. Clara wiped her brow with the back of her wrist and looked up at Thornwood. The house looked back. She had expected something grand, something cold. What she saw was a house that had been loved once and had forgotten how to be loved again. The shutters needed painting. The rose garden to the left had gone wild. And the front steps, though swept clean, had a crack running down the center that no one had bothered to fix. A woman appeared at the top of those steps before Clara had taken 3 paces. Gray hair pinned tight under a white cap. Black dress, keys at her waist, and hands that trembled against those keys like leaves in a wind only she could feel. "Miss Mercer." Clara stopped walking. "You know my name. I've been waiting 4 months to say it." The woman came down the steps slowly, carefully, as if her legs weren't quite sure they wanted to carry her. "I'm Mrs. Pratt, the housekeeper. I'm the one who placed the advertisement." The advertisement asked for a seamstress. It did. It asked for a particular kind of discretion. It did. Clara reached into the inside pocket of her traveling coat. She pulled out a folded paper creased and recreased so many times the edges had gone soft. "This contract was in my grandmother's things. It says the master of Thornwood requests my services for an indefinite period. It says room and board will be provided. It says, I know what it says, child." Mrs. Pratt's voice cracked on the last word. "I wrote it. You wrote it. On behalf of someone who had the authority to make such an offer. The master of the house." Mrs. Pratt's hands stopped trembling. They went very still against the keys. "No, Miss Mercer. Not the master. The mistress. 3 years ago, before she passed." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not much. Just enough to remind her that she was standing on something she did not yet understand. "The mistress has been dead for 3 years. "Yes, and her letter reached my grandmother 3 years ago." "Yes. My grandmother kept it. She kept it until the week she died. And then she gave it to me with instructions to come here when I was ready." Clara folded the contract and put it back in her pocket. "Mrs. Pratt, I am not a fool. I know when I am being brought into something larger than a torn hem. I would like you to tell me what I am walking into before I walk into it." The housekeeper looked at her for a long moment. The summer air hung between them thick and still. "Come inside, Miss Mercer. The heat will take you if you stand out here much longer. And what I have to tell you is better told near a fire, even in July." Clara followed her up the cracked steps and through the front door. The inside of Thornwood smelled like beeswax and wood smoke, and something underneath that Clara could not name. Something old, something patient. The air was cooler here, but not by much. Mrs. Pratt led her through a hallway lined with portraits. Clara's eyes moved across them without stopping. Men in wigs, women in silk. A boy of perhaps 12 with dark hair and gray-blue eyes that looked too serious for his age. She stopped at that one. "Who is this?" Mrs. Pratt turned back. Her face softened for just a moment, then hardened again. "That is the master, Mr. Nathaniel Thornwood, painted when he was 12 years old the year his mother left. Walked out the front door one May morning and never came back. Left a note saying she was going somewhere she could breathe. Didn't say where that was. Didn't say if she was coming back. The master's father remarried that autumn. A woman named Adelaide Whitfield." Mrs. Pratt paused. "She is the one who sent for your grandmother. And she is the one who wrote your contract 3 years before you ever held it in your hands." Clara looked at the portrait of the boy, at the serious eyes, at the mouth that had already learned not to expect anything good. Did she love him, Adelaide? More than her own life, Miss Mercer. She came to this house thinking she would manage a household and raise a motherless boy. She stayed 20 years and became the only mother he ever truly had. Mrs. Pratt's voice dropped. And then she died. And he has not been the same since. Show me my workroom. Miss Mercer, show me my workroom, Mrs. Pratt. Whatever you need to tell me there. I do better work when my hands are busy, and I suspect you do better talking when you're not standing in a hallway where anyone might hear. The housekeeper nodded once. She turned and led Clara up the stairs. The workroom was in the east wing. 2 doors down from a set of rooms that had been closed for 3 years, Mrs. Pratt said. The late mistress's apartments. The door opened onto a space that had been a sewing parlor once. Someone had aired it that morning. Clara could smell the lavender on the windowsills. But the furniture was not what she expected. Not the light, fashionable pieces a wealthy Virginia lady would choose. Everything in this room was old. Dark walnut. Brass fittings worn smooth. A writing desk in the corner that looked like it had been waiting for someone specific to sit at it again. Clara set her sewing case on the long table by the window. She did not remove her gloves. Not yet. She walked the perimeter of the room first, the way her grandmother had taught her to walk into any new space. Touch nothing. See everything. A bolt of dove-gray wool untouched. 3 spools of silk thread, their colors faded from the light. A pair of shears in their original case, a pincushion shaped like a strawberry handmade, and on the writing desk, half hidden under a leather blotter, the corner of an envelope. Clara did not reach for it. Instead, she turned to the wall above the fireplace. There was a portrait there. She had not seen it from the doorway. The angle had been wrong. Now she saw it. A woman in her 40s, seated in a high-backed chair, hands folded in her lap. Her gown was the color of old wine, deep and rich. The hem was embroidered with small roses, 6-petaled, each one stitched in a technique that Clara recognized before her mind had finished naming what she was seeing. A backstitch in 3 threads. The center thread tied off into a tiny anchor knot invisible from the right side. The rose stitch. Her grandmother had taught her that stitch when she was 9 years old. Her grandmother had said no one else used it anymore. Not the dressmakers in Richmond. Not the embroiderers in Philadelphia. Her grandmother had called it the rose stitch because of where she had first learned it. In this house. In this room. For this woman. Clara's hands began to shake. She pressed them flat against her thighs and breathed in through her nose. Mrs. Pratt? Yes, Miss Mercer. The woman in this portrait. She is Adelaide Thornwood. She is. And the roses on her hem. The embroidery. Who did that work? Mrs. Pratt came to stand beside her. The older woman looked up at the portrait with eyes that had clearly looked at it many times before and had wept each time. Your grandmother, Miss Mercer, Margaret Mercer. She was the mistress's personal seamstress for 15 years before her hands got too stiff to hold a needle steady. She did all the fine work on the mistress's gowns, all the embroidery, all the mending that required more than ordinary skill. Clara climbed onto the footstool by the mantel. She traced the air an inch above the canvas, following the stitching, counting the petals. 12 roses, each one anchored, each one her grandmother's hand. She stepped down from the footstool. She stood very still in the center of the room. Her grandmother had never told her. 15 years of work in this house, and Margaret Mercer had never once spoken the name Thornwood to her granddaughter. Had never mentioned Adelaide. Had never explained why she kept a locked box under her bed that she forbade Clara to touch. Until the week she died, she, Mrs. Pratt. Clara's voice came out steady, steadier than she felt. There is an envelope on that writing desk, under the blotter. There is. How long has it been there? 3 years, since the day the mistress died. She wrote it the morning of her passing, sealed it herself, told me to put it in this room and leave it until the right person came to find it. And who is the right person? Mrs. Pratt walked to the writing desk. She lifted the edge of the blotter just enough for Clara to see the envelope fully. The handwriting on the front was elegant, practiced. The hand of a woman who had written many letters and meant every word of every one. To be opened by Margaret Mercer's granddaughter when she comes. Below that, in smaller letters, for my son. Because I could not say it while I lived. Clara's knees wanted to give. She did not let them. She knew I would come. She believed it. How could she possibly know that my grandmother would keep her letter for 3 years and then give it to me on her deathbed? Mrs. Pratt set the blotter down carefully. When she turned to face Clara, there were tears on her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. Because your grandmother made her a promise, Miss Mercer. The same promise you made your grandmother, I reckon. To come to this house when you were called. To see what needed seeing. To mend what needed mending. She paused. Adelaide Thornwood knew she was dying. She knew her brother had been stealing from this estate for years. She knew her son would not see it because grief had made him blind. She needed someone from outside the house to come and witness. Someone whose hands had been taught the same lessons hers were. Someone who would not be afraid of the silence in these rooms. Clara looked at the envelope. At her grandmother's name in a dead woman's handwriting. She did not touch it. Not yet. Mrs. Pratt, you said the mistress's brother has been stealing from the estate. I did. For how many years? 9. Since the year after Adelaide married into this family. And the master does not know. The master has not looked at a ledger since his stepmother died. He has not looked at much of anything. He stays in his study. He reads books he does not remember. He wears the same coat every day, a coat Adelaide made for him with her own hands, and he does not speak to anyone except to give orders. Mrs. Pratt's voice broke. He is dying, Miss Mercer. Not in his body, in his soul. And I have watched it happen for 3 years, and I have not been able to stop it. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Pratt straightened. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and opened the door. A young housemaid stood in the hallway, her face pale. Ma'am, the master's coat has been brought up. He tore it last night in the study. Thomas said he ripped it off himself and threw it against the wall after Mr. Crane left. Mr. Crane, the steward. Yes, ma'am. They were arguing about something. Thomas couldn't hear what, but the master was angrier than Thomas has ever seen him. Mrs. Pratt turned to Clara. There was something in her eyes now, something that looked almost like hope. Miss Mercer, the coat is the master's most precious possession. Adelaide made it for him on his 23rd birthday. He has worn it every day for 9 years, every day, even in summer, even when it makes no sense. She paused. Will you look at it? Clara nodded once. The housemaid brought the coat in. It was darker than Clara had expected. Charcoal wool with a thin black silk lining. The kind of garment a man wears when he wants the world to look past him. When he does not want to be seen. The tear was on the right shoulder. 3 inches long. Ragged at the edges. Clara ran her thumb along the inside of the seam. He had not torn it on a nail. He had ripped it off his own body and thrown it. The wool had split where the stitching was weakest. The lining had held on a moment longer, and then given way. She spread the coat on the long table. She studied the tear the way her grandmother had taught her to study any wound. Not just the place where it had opened, but the places around it. The threads that had held. The threads that had wanted to hold, but couldn't. And there on the inside of the shoulder seam, she found what she was looking for. A tiny anchor knot. The rose stitch. Hidden inside a coat that Adelaide Thornwood had made for her stepson, with her own hands, using a technique she had learned from Clara's grandmother. Clara's eyes burned. She did not blink. Mrs. Pratt? Yes, Miss Mercer. I am going to mend this coat. I am going to mend it with the same stitch the original maker used. The same thread. The same hand as close as I can come to it. She looked up. And when I am finished, I am going to bring it to the master myself. Not to his valet. To him. And I am going to find out whether the man in that portrait with the serious eyes is still in there somewhere or whether the house has swallowed him whole. Mrs. Pratt pressed her hand to her mouth. Clara turned back to the coat. She removed her gloves finger by finger and laid them on the table. Then she picked up her needle and began. Clara worked for 90 minutes without stopping. The needle moved through the wool like it knew the path already, like her grandmother's hands were guiding hers from somewhere beyond the grave. She did not think about what she was doing. She let her fingers remember. 3 small backstitches in black silk thread, each one anchored with the rose knot, hidden inside the lining where no one would ever see it unless they knew exactly where to look. The tear closed, the wool came together, the lining smoothed flat. When she finished, she held the coat up to the fading afternoon light. She turned it slowly, looking for the weakness, looking for any sign that the fabric had ever given way. She did not find one. Mrs. Pratt had been watching from the doorway for the last 20 minutes. She had not said a word. Now she stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the shoulder seam. "Lord have mercy." "It's not magic, Mrs. Pratt. It's just patience and the right thread." "That's not what I'm looking at, child." The housekeeper reached out and touched the place where the tear had been. Her fingers trembled against the wool. "I watched Adelaide make this coat. I sat in this very room while she worked on it night after night. She said the same thing you just said. Patience and the right thread." She looked up at Clara. "She learned that from your grandmother, didn't she?" "She did." "And your grandmother taught you." "The week before she died. She made me practice the rose stitch until my fingers bled. She said I would need it someday. She said I would know when." Clara folded the coat over her arm. "I know now. The master is in his study. He takes his supper there most nights, alone. Then I will bring him his coat before supper." "Miss Mercer." Mrs. Pratt caught her arm. "He does not know you are here. He did not hire you. He did not sign that contract. When you walk into his study, you will be a stranger who has appeared in his house without his permission, holding the most precious thing he owns." Clara looked at the older woman's hand on her arm, at the fingers still trembling, at the fear in her eyes. "Mrs. Pratt, what are you afraid of?" "I am afraid he will send you away. I am afraid he will look at you and see only another person trying to take something from him. I am afraid—" Her voice cracked. "I am afraid Adelaide was wrong, that there is nothing left of him to save." Clara put her free hand over the housekeeper's. "Then we will find out together. But I did not travel 3 days on a coach to stand outside a closed door and wonder." She walked out of the workroom and down the stairs. The study was at the end of the main hallway. Clara knew it before Mrs. Pratt had told her. Some rooms announce themselves. Some doors say, "Keep out so loudly you can hear it in your bones." This door said both. She knocked twice. Sharp. Clear. No answer. She knocked again. "I said I am not to be disturbed." The voice from inside was low, flat. The voice of a man who had stopped expecting anything good to come through doors. Clara opened it anyway. Nathaniel Thornwood was sitting at his desk with a book open in front of him that he was not reading. His pen was in his hand, but there was no paper. He was staring at nothing. When the door opened, his head came up. His eyes found her. For a moment, neither of them moved. He was taller than the portrait had suggested. Older, too, though not by much. The dark hair was the same. The gray-blue eyes were the same. But the boy in the painting had looked like someone waiting for something bad to happen. The man at the desk looked like someone who had stopped waiting because the bad thing had already come and stayed. "Who are you?" Clara stepped into the room. She did not close the door behind her. "My name is Clara Mercer. I arrived this afternoon. I did not send for anyone." "No, sir, you did not." "Then how are you in my house?" "I was sent for by someone else. Someone who had the authority to make such an arrangement." Clara walked to the chair across from his desk and laid the coat over the back of it. "Your coat was brought to me this morning. I was told you tore it last night." Nathaniel's eyes went to the coat. Something moved in his face. Something that might have been pain, or might have been anger, or might have been both at once. "Who told you to touch that?" "No one, sir. Mrs. Pratt brought it to me because she knew I could mend it. I mended it because it needed mending. It was torn. It was. It was torn beyond repair." "No, sir, it was not." He stood up from the desk, He was tall, taller than she had thought, and when he moved, there was something coiled in his body, something held back, something that had been held back for a very long time. He crossed to the chair. He picked up the coat. His hands moved over the fabric the way a man touches something he is afraid to believe in. Slowly, carefully, waiting for the lie to reveal itself. When he reached the right shoulder, he stopped. He turned the coat in his hands. He held it up to the light from the window. He ran his thumb over the place where the tear had been. There is no scar. No, sir. There is no patch. No. How is that possible? Clara did not move from where she stood. She kept her voice steady. I used the same stitch the original maker used, the same thread, the same technique, a backstitch in 3 threads with an anchor knot hidden in the seam. Nathaniel's hands went still on the coat. How do you know what stitch Adelaide used? Because I recognized her work, sir. The woman in the portrait in my workroom is wearing a gown embroidered with the same technique. I learned that stitch from my grandmother when I was 9 years old. My grandmother taught it to Adelaide Thornwood 15 years ago. The silence in the room was the kind of silence that has weight. Clara could feel it pressing against her chest. Nathaniel set the coat down on the chair. He did not fold it. He laid it flat carefully, the way a man lays down something he is not sure he deserves to touch anymore. Your grandmother was Margaret Mercer. Yes. She was Adelaide's seamstress. For 15 years. She left this house before I was old enough to remember her. Her hands got stiff. She couldn't hold a needle steady anymore. Adelaide kept writing to her, though, every quarter for 9 years. They sent letters back and forth until... Clara stopped. Until Adelaide died. Yes. Nathaniel turned away from her. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room, his hands clasped behind him. Miss Mercer, I did not hire you. I did not send for you. I do not know what arrangement was made between my stepmother and your grandmother, but I was not part of it. You have mended my coat, and I thank you for that. But I think it would be best if you left Thornwood in the morning. Clara had expected this. She had prepared for it on the walk down the stairs, but hearing it still felt like a door closing. May I ask you one question before I go, sir? He did not turn around. Ask it. When you tore the coat last night, did you want it to stay torn? Or did you want someone to mend it back to what it was before you broke it? His shoulders tightened. She saw the muscles move under his shirt. She saw his hands grip each other behind his back, the knuckles going white. That is not a simple question, Miss Mercer. No, sir, it is not. He was quiet for a long moment. The summer evening light came through the window and touched the side of his face, and Clara saw something there she had not seen before. Not anger, not grief. Exhaustion. The bone-deep exhaustion of a man who had been holding himself together for so long, he had forgotten there was any other way to be. I wanted it to stay torn, he said finally, and I wanted someone to mend it, both at once. Is that possible? Yes, sir, it is very possible. He turned around. He looked at her directly for the first time since she had walked into the room. His eyes moved across her face like he was reading something written there. Who sent you here, Miss Mercer? The truth. Your stepmother, sir. She wrote a letter to my grandmother 3 years ago before she died. The letter asked my grandmother to send me to Thornwood when I was ready. My grandmother kept that letter until the week she passed. She gave it to me on her deathbed and made me promise to come. Why? I don't know yet, but there is another letter waiting for you in my workroom. Adelaide wrote it the morning she died. It has your name on the front. Clara paused. She wanted me to bring it to you, sir. She wanted me to be in the room when you read it. Nathaniel's face did something complicated. It started to close the way faces do when they are trying to keep something in. And then it stopped. It held itself in the middle between closing and opening like a door caught by the wind. Why you? He asked quietly. Why would Adelaide want a stranger in the room when I read her last words? I don't think she saw me as a stranger, sir. I think she saw me as the granddaughter of the woman who taught her the rose stitch, the woman who helped her mend things for 15 years. Clara kept her voice gentle. I think she wanted me here because she knew you would need someone who could see what was broken without being told. The clock on the mantel struck 7. Neither of them moved. "Bring me the letter," Nathaniel said. "Not tonight. Tomorrow morning, after breakfast. He stopped. His hand came up and pressed against his forehead. "I need to think, Miss Mercer. I have not thought clearly in a very long time. I need tonight to remember how." "Yes, sir." "You may stay. For now. Until I have read the letter and understood what Adelaide wanted. Thank you. Do not thank me yet." He picked up the coat from the chair. He held it against his chest, like a child holds a blanket. "You may have come to mend things, Miss Mercer. But this house has been broken for longer than you know. And some things once broken cannot be put back together." Clara nodded. She turned to leave. At the door she stopped. "Sir." "Yes. When I mended the coat, I found something inside the lining, near the shoulder seam. An anchor knot tied in a very particular way. It's called the rose stitch because of where Adelaide first learned to use it." She paused. "She put it there on purpose, sir. In the place closest to your heart. She wanted you to carry her with you without knowing." She did not wait for his answer. She walked out of the study and closed the door behind her. Mrs. Pratt was waiting at the end of the hallway, her hands twisted together in front of her. "Well, he's letting me stay. For now." "Did he read the letter?" "Not yet. Tomorrow morning after breakfast." Mrs. Pratt let out a breath. "Thank the Lord. I was certain he would—" She stopped. Her eyes went past Clara toward the study door. "Did you tell him about the ledgers?" "No." "Did you tell him about the money?" "No, Mrs. Pratt, not yet." "When will you tell him?" Clara looked back at the closed door. At the crack of light showing underneath it. At the shadow that moved across that light as Nathaniel Thornwood paced inside his study, holding the coat his stepmother had made for him against his chest. "When he's ready to hear it. When he trusts me enough to believe it." She turned back to Mrs. Pratt. "How long has Mr. Crane been the steward of this estate?" 14 years. "And how long has Marcus Whitfield been taking money?" 9 years. Since the year after Adelaide married into this family. "Does Mr. Crane know—" Mrs. Pratt's face went pale. "Miss Mercer, Does he know?" The housekeeper was silent for a long moment. Her hands trembled at her waist. Her eyes filled with tears she did not let fall. "I believe he does, miss. I believe he has known from the beginning." "Then he is part of it?" "Yes, I believe he is." Clara nodded slowly. "Where does Mr. Crane take his supper?" "In his office, miss. The small room behind the kitchen." "And where does he keep the estate ledgers?" "In the same office, in a locked cabinet beside his desk." Clara walked past the housekeeper toward the stairs. "I need to see the inside of that cabinet, Mrs. Pratt. Tonight, while Mr. Crane is at supper. Can you arrange for him to be delayed? Miss Mercer, if he catches you?" "He will not catch me. My grandmother taught me to be quiet with my hands, Mrs. Pratt. That includes opening things that other people would prefer stayed closed." The housekeeper stared at her. "You're not just a seamstress, are you?" "I am exactly a seamstress, Mrs. Pratt, but a good seamstress sees where the seams are weak, and she knows which threads to pull." Mrs. Pratt closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed in her face. The fear was still there, but underneath it, for the first time since Clara had arrived, there was something else. Hope. "I will tell Mr. Crane that the master wishes to speak with him about a matter concerning the north pasture. That should keep him occupied for at least 30 minutes. The master will deny it, of course, but by then you will be finished." "Thank you. Do not thank me, child. If this goes wrong, we will both be on the road by morning." Clara smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had buried her grandmother 3 days ago and traveled to a stranger's house on nothing but faith and a promise. "Then we had better make sure it does not go wrong." She went upstairs to change into darker clothes. The steward's office was exactly where Mrs. Pratt had said it would be. A small room behind the kitchen, poorly lit, with a desk covered in papers and a locked cabinet against the far wall. Clara stood in the doorway and listened. The sounds of supper came from the kitchen. Dishes clattering. Voices low and easy. Mr. Crane had left 5 minutes ago, summoned by Mrs. Pratt with a message from the master. She had perhaps 20 minutes, maybe less. She crossed to the cabinet. The lock was simple. The kind of lock that keeps out curious housemaids, not determined women with hairpins and 15 years of practice opening her grandmother's jewelry box. It took her 40 seconds. The cabinet door swung open. Inside, on 3 shelves, stood the ledgers of Thornwood Estate. 9 years of accounts. 9 years of every penny that had come in and gone out. Clara pulled out the ledger for 1816, the year Adelaide had died. She opened it on the desk and began to read. The numbers were neat, precise. Mr. Crane had a careful hand. Every column added up. Every total matched. But Clara had learned to read ledgers from her grandmother, who had learned to read them from Adelaide herself. And she knew what to look for. Not the numbers that were there. The numbers that should have been there and weren't. She turned to the 3rd quarter of 1816. July, August, September. The last months of Adelaide's life. Repairs to the dovecote roof, £41 and 6 shillings. Clara had walked past the dovecote on her way into the house. The roof sagged in the middle. The tiles were cracked. No one had repaired that roof in years. She turned to another page. Purchase of a draft horse for the home farm, £86. She had seen the home farm from the window of her workroom. 2 old draft horses, their coats dull with age. No new horses. Not in years. She turned to another page. Travel expenses for estate business in Richmond, £112. Clara closed the ledger. She put it back exactly where she had found it. She closed the cabinet. She locked it again with her hairpin. Then she went back upstairs to her workroom and pulled her grandmother's wooden box from the bottom of her traveling trunk. Inside the box, wrapped in cloth, were the pages Adelaide had sent to Margaret Mercer every quarter for 9 years. The true records. The ones Adelaide had kept in her own hand, hidden from her brother, and from the steward who did his bidding. Clara spread them out on the table beside her notes from the steward's ledger. The numbers did not match. They did not match by exactly the amounts she had expected. 9 years of theft. 9 years of false repairs and phantom horses and journeys that never happened. Over £600. Stolen from the estate of a man who had been too consumed by grief to notice. Clara gathered the papers. She stacked them neatly. She put them back in the wooden box and locked it with the small key her grandmother had worn around her neck until the day she died. Then she sat down in the chair by the window and watched the darkness come. Tomorrow morning, she would bring Nathaniel Thornwood his stepmother's letter. And the morning after that, or the morning after that, when he trusted her enough to hear it, she would tell him the truth about the men who had been stealing from him, while he drowned in his own sorrow. But tonight, she sat in Adelaide's workroom and looked at the portrait of the woman who had taught her grandmother the rose stitch. The woman who had written letters in secret for 9 years, preparing for the day when someone would come to Thornwood and see what she had seen. "I'm here," Clara whispered to the portrait. "I came. Now tell me what you need me to do." The portrait did not answer. The painted eyes looked back at her, patient and kind, holding secrets that only the dead could tell. Somewhere in the house a clock struck midnight. Clara closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. She dreamed of roses with 6 petals, each one anchored with a knot that could not be undone. She dreamed of a woman in a wine-colored gown, sitting at a writing desk, penning letters by candlelight. She dreamed of a boy with serious eyes, standing at a window, watching his mother walk away down a gravel drive and never come back. And she dreamed of hands, her grandmother's hands teaching her the rose stitch, Adelaide's hands stitching it into a coat, her own hands pulling thread through wool, mending what had been torn. When she woke, the sun was up, and someone was knocking at her door. "Miss Mercer?" Mrs. Pratt's voice tight with urgency. "The master wishes to see you. Now. In the study. Before breakfast." Clara was on her feet before the housekeeper had finished speaking. She splashed water on her face, pinned her hair, and grabbed Adelaide's letter from the writing desk. Nathaniel was standing at the window when she came in. He was wearing the coat. The mended coat. He had not taken it off since the night before. "Close the door." She closed it. "You said my stepmother wrote letters to your grandmother for 9 years. Yes, sir. You said they sent pages back and forth. Yes." He turned from the window. His face was different this morning. Something in it had shifted overnight. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it now there was something else. Attention. "Show me." Clara opened the letter. She handed it to him. He read it standing up. He read it slowly, the way a man reads something he is afraid to understand. When he finished the first page, his hand shook so badly he had to grip the edge of his desk to keep standing. When he finished the second page, he sat down. When he finished the third page, he did not move for a very long time. "She knew," he said finally. His voice was barely a whisper. "She knew Marcus was stealing from us. She knew Crane was helping him. She wrote it all down." "Yes, sir. She tried to tell me, before she died. She tried to tell me something was wrong with the accounts and I—" His voice broke. "I told her not to worry. I told her I would look into it after she was better. I told her—" He stopped. Clara did not speak. She did not move. She let the silence do what silence does best. Give a man room to feel. "Why didn't she just show me?" Nathaniel looked up at her, and his eyes were wet. "Why didn't she put these papers in my hands and make me see?" "Because she loved you, sir. And because she knew you were already carrying more than you could bear. Your mother leaving, your father dying, her own illness. She did not want to add one more weight to shoulders that were already breaking." Clara paused. "So she made another plan, a longer plan. She sent the papers to my grandmother for safekeeping. She wrote a letter asking for me to come. And she trusted that when you were ready, when enough time had passed, I would be here to show you what she could not show you herself." Nathaniel pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. His shoulders shook. He did not make a sound. Clara waited. When he lowered his hands, his face was wet, but his voice was steady. "What do you need from me, Miss Mercer?" "I need you to stay calm, sir. I need you not to confront Mr. Crane or Marcus Whitfield until we have documented everything. I need you to let me finish what Adelaide started. And then we bring them to justice. Both of them. For 9 years of theft. For 9 years of betraying a woman who trusted them." Nathaniel nodded slowly. He folded the letter and held it in both hands the way a man holds a letter from the dead. "How long will it take?" "A week. Maybe less. I have most of what I need already. I just need time to compare the records and write out the discrepancies in a form the magistrate will accept." "And what do I do while you work?" Clara looked at him. At the coat he was wearing. At the letter in his hands. At the man who had been drowning for 3 years and was just now starting to reach for the surface. "You live, sir. You eat breakfast. You ride your horse. You walk in the garden Adelaide planted. You do the things you stopped doing when she died." She paused. "You let me mend what needs mending, and when I'm finished, you decide what kind of man you want to be." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a strange sound, broken and rough like a rusty gate opening for the first time in years. But it was a laugh. "You are not what I expected, Miss Mercer." "No, sir. I rarely am." "Adelaide chose well." "She did." He stood up from the desk. He walked to her. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough to touch, far enough to breathe. "I have one question, Miss Mercer, before we begin." "Ask it." "Are you afraid of me?" Clara looked into his eyes. Gray-blue. Serious. The same eyes she had seen in the portrait of the boy who had watched his mother leave. The same eyes 20 years older, carrying 20 years of weight. "No, sir," she said quietly. "I am not afraid of you. But I have not yet decided whether you should be afraid of me." He almost smiled. It did not reach his mouth, but it moved through his eyes for half a heartbeat, and then it was gone. Then we understand each other. We do. He walked past her to the door. He opened it. He turned back. Miss Mercer. Yes. Thank you for mending the coat, for bringing the letter, for coming when Adelaide asked you to come. He paused. I have not thanked anyone for anything in 3 years. I had forgotten how. He walked out of the study without waiting for her answer. Clara stood alone in the room with the morning light coming through the windows and the weight of 9 years of secrets pressing against her chest. She had 1 week. 1 week to untangle a web of theft and betrayal. 1 week to prove that Marcus Whitfield and Mr. Crane had been robbing the estate. 1 week to save Thornwood from the men who had been bleeding it dry. And somewhere in that week, she would have to decide what to do about the man with the serious eyes and the mended coat. The man who had just walked out the door carrying his stepmother's last letter like it was the only thing in the world worth holding. Clara Mercer had come to Thornwood to fulfill a promise to her dead grandmother. She had not planned to stay. But as she watched Nathaniel Thornwood walk away, she felt something shift in her chest. Something she had not expected. Something that felt like the first stitch in a seam she had not yet learned how to finish. She gathered her papers and went back upstairs to work. 4 days passed. Clara worked from dawn until her eyes burned. She spread Adelaide's pages across the long table in her workroom and matched them line by line against the numbers she had copied from Mr. Crane's ledgers. She wrote out every discrepancy in her grandmother's careful script. She documented every phantom repair, every missing horse, every journey that never happened. The total grew with each passing day. By the end of the 4th day, she had counted over 640 pounds stolen across 9 years. She was bent over the table double-checking her figures for the 3rd time when the door opened without a knock. Nathaniel stood in the doorway. He was still wearing the coat. He had not taken it off since the morning she gave him Adelaide's letter. You missed supper. Clara looked up. The candles had burned low. She had not noticed the darkness gathering outside the windows. I was close to finishing. Are you finished now? Almost. Another day, maybe 2. He walked into the room. He moved differently than he had that first night when he had stood in the doorway of his study and asked who she was. There was still something coiled in him, something held back. But it was looser now, like a rope that had been wrapped too tight for too long and was finally starting to remember what it felt like to breathe. He stopped at the edge of the table. His eyes moved across the papers spread there, the columns of numbers, the names of repairs that never happened, the dates, the amounts. 600 pounds. 643 pounds 7 shillings, Clara said. That is the total I can document. The actual number may be higher. Higher? There are gaps in your stepmother's records. Quarters where she was too ill to write, or where the letters did not reach my grandmother. Whatever was taken during those quarters, I cannot prove. Nathaniel picked up one of the pages. His hand was steady, but Clara could see the tension in his jaw, the way his teeth pressed together behind his closed lips. Marcus sent me a letter yesterday. Clara's hands went still on the table. What did it say? That he has heard rumors of a seamstress in the East Wing who has been asking questions about household matters that do not concern her. That he is concerned for my welfare. That he wishes to visit Thornwood at his earliest convenience to discuss the situation. Nathaniel set the page down. His earliest convenience appears to be tomorrow morning. Tomorrow. He will arrive before noon. He did not ask permission. He informed me. Clara stood up from the table. Her back ached from bending over the papers for hours. Her eyes burned from the candlelight. But her mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in days. Does he know what I have found? I do not know. I suspect he knows something is wrong. He has spies in this house. He has always had spies in this house. Nathaniel's voice was bitter. Crane, certainly. Perhaps others. I have been a fool, Miss Mercer. A blind, grieving fool. You were not a fool, sir. You were a man who trusted the people he should have been able to trust. That is the same thing. No. Clara came around the table. She stood in front of him close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the lines at the corners of his mouth. A fool does not learn. A fool does not change. You are learning, sir. You are changing. That is not foolishness. That is courage. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in his eyes, something she had not seen there before. You speak as though you know me. I am beginning to. And what do you see, Miss Mercer, when you look at me? What do you see? Clara did not look away. I see a man who has been carrying a weight too heavy for one person. I see a man who was abandoned by his mother and raised by a woman who loved him enough to plan for his future from beyond the grave. I see a man who tore his own coat because he was so angry at himself he could not stand to wear it anymore. She paused. And I see a man who is afraid that if he lets himself feel anything, he will break apart and never be able to put himself back together. Nathaniel's breath caught. It was a small sound, almost inaudible, but Clara heard it. How do you know that? Because I have felt it myself, sir. The day my grandmother died, I wanted to tear everything I owned. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. I wanted to break myself into pieces and scatter them across the road so I would never have to feel anything again. She kept her voice steady. But I did not, because she asked me to come here, because she made me promise. And I have learned that keeping a promise to someone who loved you is sometimes the only thing that keeps you from breaking. The room was very quiet. The candles flickered. Somewhere in the house a clock struck 9. Nathaniel reached out. His hand touched her arm just below the elbow. A light touch, careful, like a man touching something he was not sure he was allowed to hold. Miss Mercer. Yes. When Marcus comes tomorrow, I want you in the room. Sir. Not as a seamstress, not as a witness, as the woman who found the truth Adelaide left for me, as the woman who came to this house because 2 people who loved me asked her to come. His grip tightened slightly on her arm. I cannot face him alone. I have spent 3 years alone in this house and I am tired of it. I need someone beside me who knows what I know, who has seen what I have seen. Clara looked at his hand on her arm, at the fingers pressed against the fabric of her sleeve, at the knuckles that had gone white with the effort of asking. I will be there. Thank you. But sir, I must warn you. When Marcus sees the evidence, he will not go quietly. He will fight. He will lie. He will try to make you believe that I am the threat, not him. He will use every weapon he has. I know. Are you ready for that? Nathaniel's hand dropped from her arm. He turned and walked to the window. The night was dark outside, moonless, the kind of dark that swallows everything. My mother left when I was 12 years old, he said quietly. She came to my room before dawn and sat on the edge of my bed and told me I was the kindest person in this house. Then she kissed my forehead and walked away and never came back. Clara did not speak. She let the silence hold the weight of what he was saying. For 20 years I have believed I was the reason she left. That I did something, said something, was something that made her unable to breathe in this house. My father told me she was a coward. He never spoke of her again. And I believed him because what else could I believe? I was 12 years old. I did not know how to understand a mother who left without saying goodbye. Sir, let me finish. His voice cracked on the words. He pressed his hand against the window frame and breathed in deep. Adelaide tried to tell me otherwise. She tried for 20 years to make me see that my mother's leaving was not my fault. But I could not hear her. I could not let myself hear her, because if my mother did not leave because of me, then why did she leave? And if I did not know why, then I could not protect myself from it happening again. Clara crossed to him. She stood beside him at the window, not touching, but close. Close enough for him to know she was there. Adelaide wrote something in her letter. Nathaniel continued. His voice was barely a whisper now. She wrote that she had found my mother, that she had traced her to a small village in New England, that my mother was alive, that she had written to her and received a letter back. Clara's heart stopped. What? My mother is alive, Miss Mercer. She has been alive all this time, and Adelaide knew and was going to tell me, but she died before she could. He turned to face Clara. His eyes were wet. His jaw was tight. His whole body was shaking with the effort of holding itself together. My mother wrote to Adelaide asking for forgiveness. She said she left because she could not breathe in a house where my father made her feel worthless every day. She said she wanted to take me with her, but she was afraid he would destroy her if she tried. She said, he stopped. He pressed his hand against his mouth. A sound came out of him that was not quite a sob and not quite a scream. Something in between. Something that had been locked inside him for 20 years and was finally breaking free. Clara did what her grandmother had taught her to do. She stood still. She let the room hold him. She did not try to fill the silence with words. When he could speak again, his voice was raw. She said she never stopped loving me. She said she thought of me every day. She said she was sorry. She was so sorry. Where is the letter? Adelaide kept it. It was with the other papers she left for me. I found it last night after you went to sleep. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have not slept since. Sir, Nathaniel. He cut her off. My name is Nathaniel, and if you are going to stand beside me tomorrow when I face the man who has been stealing from my family for 9 years, I would like you to call me by my name. Clara nodded slowly. Nathaniel. Thank you. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. I am going to find her, Miss Mercer. When this is over, when Marcus is gone and Crane is gone and this house is clean again, I am going to find my mother and bring her home. And if she will not come, then I will know. I will finally know why she left, and whether she still thinks of me, and whether there is anything left to mend. He looked at her. That is what Adelaide wanted, I think. She wanted me to know the truth, all of it, even the parts that hurt. Clara reached out. She took his hand. His fingers were cold. They trembled against hers. Then we will find her together, after tomorrow, after this is finished. He gripped her hand like a drowning man grips a rope. They stood there in the dark until the candles burned out. The morning came too fast. Clara was in the green drawing room by 9:30, the leather portfolio in her lap, the evidence stacked inside it in the order she had prepared. 9 years of theft documented in Adelaide's hand and verified against the estate ledgers. Mrs. Pratt had positioned herself by the door. Her face was pale, but her hands had stopped trembling. She looked like a woman who had been waiting for this moment for 3 years and was finally ready to see it through. Nathaniel stood by the window. He was wearing the coat. He had not taken it off. His hands were clasped behind his back the way men stand when they do not trust their hands to stay still. The clock struck 10. At 10:15, the sound of hooves on gravel came from the front drive. At 10:20, the front door opened. At 10:22, Marcus Whitfield walked into the green drawing room with a smile on his face that did not reach his eyes. He was exactly as Clara had imagined him. 50 years old, soft around the middle, hair going gray at the temples, slicked back with oil. Dressed too well for a man who had no inheritance, in a blue coat with silver buttons and a silk waistcoat that must have cost more than Clara earned in a year. His eyes found Nathaniel first, then Mrs. Pratt, then Clara. They lingered on Clara. Henry. He used the nickname Adelaide had used. The name only family was allowed to use. I came as quickly as I could. When I heard about the situation here, Sit down, Marcus. The smile flickered. Just for a moment. Then it was back wider than before. Of course. Of course. He lowered himself into the chair across from Clara. His eyes moved to the portfolio in her lap. And who is this charming young woman, your new housekeeper, Her name is Clara Mercer. She is the granddaughter of Margaret Mercer, who was Adelaide's personal seamstress for 15 years. Marcus's face went very still. The smile did not disappear, but it froze, like ice forming over water. Margaret Mercer. I remember the name. I'm sure you do. Nathaniel walked from the window to stand beside Clara's chair. He did not sit down. He stood with his hand on the back of her chair, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his body through her dress. Miss Mercer, would you please show my uncle what you have brought? Clara opened the portfolio. She lifted out the first stack of pages. Adelaide's household records for 1815, the first year of the theft. Mr. Whitfield, she said, her voice steady. In 1815, your sister Adelaide began keeping a separate set of household accounts. Not the formal ledgers that Mr. Crane maintained for the estate. Personal records, written in her own hand, documenting every penny that came in and went out of Thornwood. Marcus's smile tightened. My sister was always meticulous. She was. She was also careful. Every quarter she sent copies of these records to my grandmother in Fredericksburg, for safekeeping. My grandmother kept them in a locked box under her bed for 9 years. She laid the first page on the table between them. In the third quarter of 1815, Mr. Crane authorized a payment of £32 for repairs to the stable roof. According to Adelaide's records, no repairs were made to the stable roof that year. I spoke with the head groom yesterday. He confirmed it. Marcus did not move. He did not speak. Clara laid down another page. In the first quarter of 1816, Mr. Crane authorized a payment of £41 and 6 shillings for repairs to the Dovecote roof. The Dovecote roof has not been repaired since 1812. I walked past it this morning. The tiles are cracked. The structure is sagging. Another page. In the second quarter of 1817, Mr. Crane authorized £86 for the purchase of a draft horse for the home farm. No horse was purchased. The same 2 draft horses have worked that farm for the past 8 years. Another page. Another. Another. Clara laid them out like cards in a game she had already won. 9 years of theft. 9 years of false records. 9 years of money flowing out of Thornwood and into pockets that had no right to hold it. When she finished, there were 37 pages on the table. Marcus Whitfield sat very still in his chair. His smile was gone now. In its place was something harder. Something that had been hiding underneath the charm all along. This is absurd, he said finally. His voice had changed too. The warmth was gone. You are accusing me of theft based on the scribblings of a sick woman and the word of a seamstress. I am not accusing you, Mr. Whitfield. I am documenting what your sister documented. I am presenting evidence that will be shown to the magistrate when he arrives on Monday. The magistrate, Nathaniel spoke for the first time since Marcus had sat down. I sent for him yesterday. He will be here in 3 days. You will remain at Thornwood until then. Marcus stood up. His chair scraped back against the floor. This is outrageous. I am your family, Henry, your only family. I have supported this estate, supported you for 9 years, and this is how you repay me, by believing the accusations of a stranger over your own blood. Sit down, Marcus. I will not sit down. I will not be treated like a criminal in the house where my sister lived and died. I will not— I said sit down. Nathaniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. Marcus stopped mid-sentence. His mouth hung open. He stared at his nephew like he was seeing him for the first time. You wrote to Adelaide in 1815, Nathaniel said. His voice was quiet now, but there was steel underneath it. You asked her to authorize the first payment. You told her it was for repairs to the north pasture fence. She kept that letter, Marcus. She made a copy and sent it to Margaret Mercer. Miss Mercer has the copy in her portfolio. Marcus's face went white. You have been stealing from this estate for 9 years. You have been using Crane to falsify the records. You have been bleeding Thornwood dry while I sat in my study and mourned the woman who knew exactly what you were doing. Nathaniel stepped forward. Adelaide tried to tell me. She tried to show me, and I was too blind with grief to see it. But I see it now, Marcus. I see all of it. Henry. Marcus's voice had changed again, softer now, pleading. Henry, you must understand I had debts, terrible debts. Men who would have destroyed me if I did not pay. I never meant to take so much. I only meant to borrow until I could repay. You meant to steal. You meant to rob your own sister's family while she lay dying in the room down the hall. You meant to use her grief and my grief to line your pockets. That is not. Do not lie to me. Nathaniel's voice rose. It filled the room. It shook the windows. Do not stand in my house in the room where Adelaide took her last breath and lie to me about what you have done. Clara stood up. She gathered the pages from the table and placed them back in the portfolio. Her hands were steady. Her heart was pounding. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, "there is nothing you can say that will change what is written on these pages. The evidence is clear. The magistrate will see it on Monday, and he will make his judgment." Marcus turned to her. His eyes were wild now, desperate. "You," he hissed. "You are the one who brought this poison into this house. You and your grandmother and your letters and your accusations." Adelaide was sick. Her mind was failing. She saw enemies everywhere in her final years. She accused everyone of betraying her. Everyone. Even her own brother who loved her. "Your sister's mind was not failing, Mr. Whitfield. Her body was failing. Her mind was sharp until the end. Sharp enough to document every penny you stole. Sharp enough to send the evidence to someone who would keep it safe until the truth could be told. You know nothing about my sister. I know what she taught my grandmother. I know what my grandmother taught me. I know the rose stitch that Adelaide embroidered into every gown she ever made, including the one in the portrait above the mantel. I know the anchor knot she tied into the lining of Nathaniel's coat in the place closest to his heart. I know the last letter she wrote asking me to come to Thornwood when I was ready, because she believed I would see what others could not. Clara stepped closer to Marcus. She was smaller than him, lighter, but she did not flinch. Your sister trusted me with her secrets, Mr. Whitfield. She trusted my grandmother with her evidence, and she trusted her son to do the right thing when the time came. She paused. The time has come. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. His face moved through several expressions: fear, rage, desperation, and finally something that might have been defeat. Then he lunged. It happened so fast, Clara barely had time to react. His hand shot out. He grabbed the portfolio. He tried to tear it from her grip. Clara held on. "Let go," he snarled. "Let go of those papers, you miserable little—" Nathaniel's fist connected with Marcus's jaw. The sound was sharp, final, like a door slamming shut. Marcus stumbled backward. He hit the edge of the table. He went down hard, his body crumpling like a puppet with cut strings. The room went silent. Nathaniel stood over his uncle, breathing hard. His hand was still clenched into a fist. His knuckles were split. Blood dripped onto the carpet. "Mrs. Pratt." His voice was steady, despite the blood, despite the fallen man at his feet. "Send Robert and Thomas up here. Tell them to take my uncle to the blue bedroom and lock the door. He is not to leave until the magistrate arrives." Mrs. Pratt was already moving. "Yes, sir." She disappeared through the door. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, quick and sure. Clara looked down at Marcus Whitfield. He was groaning on the floor, one hand pressed to his jaw, his eyes unfocused. "He will try again," she said quietly. "When he recovers, he will try to escape or try to destroy the evidence or try to convince you that I am the liar and he is the victim. I know. You cannot waver, no matter what he says." Nathaniel turned to her. His eyes were bright, fierce, alive in a way she had not seen before. "I will not waver, Miss Mercer. I have been asleep for 3 years. I am awake now." He reached out. He took her hand. Her fingers curled around his, and she felt the blood from his knuckles smear against her palm. "Thank you," he said, "for standing beside me, for not flinching, for being exactly who Adelaide believed you would be." Clara looked at their joined hands, at the blood, at the portfolio still clutched against her chest. "We are not finished yet." "No, but we will be, together." The footsteps of Robert and Thomas echoed in the hallway. The door opened. 2 men entered, their faces grim but determined. They lifted Marcus from the floor and carried him out. The green drawing room fell silent. Clara and Nathaniel stood alone in the aftermath. Their hands still joined the evidence safe, the worst of it over. But Clara knew as she looked into Nathaniel's eyes that the worst of it was only the beginning. Because somewhere out there in a small village in New England, a woman who had left her son 20 years ago was still waiting to be found. And Clara had promised to help find her. She did not know yet what that promise would cost. But she was beginning to understand that some costs were worth paying. The magistrate arrived on Monday morning 3 hours before noon. His name was Judge Harlan Crawford, a man of 60, with a face like weathered oak, and eyes that had seen too many lies to be fooled by another. He brought 2 constables with him and a clerk to record the proceedings. Clara watched from the doorway of the green drawing room as the judge reviewed her evidence. Page by page, column by column. 9 years of theft laid out on the table like a map of betrayal. When he finished, he looked up at Nathaniel. "Mr. Thornwood, this is damning." "I am aware, sir. Your uncle has been bleeding this estate for nearly a decade. Your steward has been complicit from the beginning. The amounts documented here are substantial enough to warrant criminal charges. That is why I sent for you." The judge turned to Clara. His eyes moved across her face, assessing. "And you, Miss Mercer? You compiled this evidence?" "I organized it, sir. The evidence itself was gathered by Adelaide Thornwood over 9 years and preserved by my grandmother until her death." "Your grandmother was Margaret Mercer?" "Yes, sir." "The seamstress who worked for the late Mrs. Thornwood?" "For 15 years. The judge nodded slowly. He picked up one of Adelaide's pages and held it to the light. "I knew Adelaide Whitfield before she married into this family. She was the sharpest woman I ever met. Sharper than most men. If she documented something, she documented it correctly." He set the page down. "I see no reason to doubt the veracity of these records." Marcus Whitfield was brought down from the blue bedroom at 11:30. He looked worse than he had 3 days ago. His jaw was swollen where Nathaniel had struck him. His eyes were bloodshot. His fine clothes were rumpled from 3 days of confinement. But his voice when he spoke was still smooth, still charming, still the voice of a man who believed he could talk his way out of anything. "Judge Crawford, thank you for coming. I trust you will see through this farce and restore some sanity to these proceedings." The judge did not smile. "Sit down, Mr. Whitfield." "I prefer to stand." "I said sit down." Marcus sat. The proceedings lasted 2 hours. Clara presented the evidence. The judge asked questions. Marcus denied everything, then admitted some things, then blamed Mr. Crane, then blamed Adelaide's failing mind, then blamed Clara herself for fabricating documents to destroy him. Nothing worked, nothing. The judge had seen too many liars. He knew the shape of a guilty man, and Marcus Whitfield fit that shape perfectly. At 1:30, Judge Crawford delivered his verdict. "Marcus Whitfield, you are hereby charged with 9 counts of theft from the Thornwood estate, totaling £643 and 7 shillings. You will be remanded to the custody of the county jail to await trial. If convicted, you face imprisonment of not less than 7 years. Marcus's face went gray. "You cannot do this. I am family. I am—" "You are a thief, Mr. Whitfield. Family does not excuse theft. It makes it worse." The constables stepped forward. They took Marcus by the arms and lifted him from his chair. He twisted to look at Nathaniel one last time. "Henry. Henry, please. Adelaide would not have wanted this. She loved me. Adelaide documented every penny you stole from her family." Nathaniel's voice was cold, final. "She knew exactly who you were, and she made sure I would know too, even if it took 3 years and a stranger from Fredericksburg to show me." The constables dragged Marcus out of the room. His shouts echoed down the hallway, growing fainter with each step. Then the front door closed, and he was gone. Mr. Crane was dealt with next. He did not fight. He did not deny. When the judge showed him the evidence, he simply sat in his chair and nodded, his thin lips pressed into a line. "I knew it was wrong," he said quietly. "I knew from the beginning. But Mr. Whitfield said he would destroy me if I did not cooperate. He said he had connections in Richmond. He said he could have me thrown in prison on false charges if I did not do what he asked. So you stole from the family that employed you for 14 years. I followed orders, sir. I did what I was told." "That is not a defense, Mr. Crane. That is a confession." The steward was taken away in the same carriage as Marcus. Both men would await trial in the county jail. Both men would likely spend years behind bars. When the carriage disappeared down the drive, Nathaniel stood at the front door and watched until it was out of sight. Clara came to stand beside him. "It is done," she said. "No." He turned to look at her. "It is only beginning." They walked back inside together. Mrs. Pratt was waiting in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. 14 years, she whispered. 14 years that man sat at his desk and lied to us, lied to Adelaide, lied to you, sir. And I never saw it. I should have seen it. Nathaniel put his hand on her shoulder. "None of us saw it, Mrs. Pratt. We were all looking in the wrong direction. Adelaide saw it. Yes, Adelaide saw it." He glanced at Clara, and she made sure someone else would see it too when the time was right. That night, Nathaniel asked Clara to walk with him in the rose garden. The summer evening was warm, but not oppressive. The roses were in full bloom, their scent heavy in the air. Clara walked beside him with her hands clasped in front of her, waiting for him to speak. He did not speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quiet. "I owe you an apology, Miss Mercer." "For what?" "For the night you arrived. I told you to leave in the morning. I told you this house was broken beyond repair. I was wrong." Clara looked at the roses. At the garden Adelaide had planted 20 years ago. At the canes that had been pruned and tended and brought back to life season after season. "You were not wrong, sir. This house was broken. It still is in some ways. But broken things can be mended. Is that what you believe? It is what my grandmother taught me, and what Adelaide taught her." Nathaniel stopped walking. He turned to face her. "I received a letter today, from New England, from the village where Adelaide said my mother was living." Clara's heart stopped. "And she is still there. She is alive. She is—" His voice broke. He pressed his hand to his mouth and breathed in through his nose. "She has been waiting, all these years. She wrote to Adelaide 3 years ago, asking for forgiveness, and she has been waiting ever since to hear whether I would accept it." "What will you do?" "I am going to write to her. Tonight. I am going to tell her that I forgive her, that I understand now why she left, that I do not blame her anymore." "And will you ask her to come home?" Nathaniel looked at her. His eyes were wet, but his face was calm. Calmer than she had ever seen it. "I will ask her to come home. But first I need to tell you something. Something I should have said before the magistrate came. Before Marcus was taken away. Before any of this." Clara waited. "I love you, Miss Mercer." The words hung in the air between them. Clara felt them land against her chest like stones dropped into still water. "I know it is too soon," Nathaniel continued. "I know we have known each other for barely 2 weeks. I know you came here to fulfill a promise to your grandmother not to entangle yourself with a man who has spent 3 years drowning in his own grief. But I cannot pretend anymore. I cannot look at you and not say what I feel." Clara did not speak. She could not speak. Her throat had closed around the words she wanted to say. "You do not have to answer me," he said. "You do not have to feel what I feel. I only needed you to know, because Adelaide taught me that the things we do not say become the things we regret. And I have enough regrets, Miss Mercer. I will not add you to the list." Clara finally found her voice. "Say my name." "What?" "Say my name. Not Miss Mercer. My name." He looked at her. His eyes searched her face. "Clara." Again. "Clara." She stepped closer to him. Close enough to feel the warmth of his body through her dress. Close enough to see the pulse beating in his throat. "I did not come here to fall in love," she said quietly. "I came here because my grandmother asked me to. Because Adelaide asked me to. Because 2 women who loved this family believed I could help save it. And you have. I have helped. But the saving is not finished. There is still work to do. Ledgers to review. Records to correct. A household to rebuild." She paused. "And a mother to bring home." "Will you stay?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Will you stay and help me finish what we started?" Clara looked into his eyes. Gray-blue. Serious. The same eyes she had seen in the portrait of the boy who had watched his mother leave. But different now. Warmer. Alive. "I will stay," she said. But not as your seamstress. Then as what? As the woman who loves you, Nathaniel Thornwood. As the woman who has loved you since the night you told me about the morning your mother left. As the woman who watched you read Adelaide's letter, and weep, and decided in that moment that she would never leave you the way your mother did. Nathaniel's breath caught. His hands came up to cup her face. His fingers were warm against her cheeks. Clara. Yes. May I kiss you? You may. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had been starving for 3 years and had finally found food. It was desperate and fierce and tender all at once. Clara felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the place behind her ribs where her heart was pounding. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. I am going to marry you, Nathaniel said. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. When my mother has come home and this house is whole again, I am going to stand in the church in the village and make you my wife. Is that a proposal? It is a promise. Then I accept. They walked back to the house together, hand in hand, the roses blooming around them, and the summer stars beginning to appear above. 3 days later, a letter arrived from New England. Clara was in her workroom repairing the binding on one of Adelaide's old books when Mrs. Pratt appeared at the door with tears in her eyes. Miss Mercer, the master needs you, in the study, now. Clara set down her needle and went. Nathaniel was standing at his desk with a letter in his hands. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. She is coming. Clara crossed to him. Your mother. She received my letter 4 days ago. She wrote back immediately. She says... His voice cracked. He thrust the letter toward Clara. Read it. I cannot say the words out loud. Clara took the letter. The handwriting was shaky, the lines uneven, the paper spotted with what might have been tears. My dearest Henry, I have read your letter 17 times. I have wept over every word. I cannot believe after 20 years of silence that you have forgiven me, that you want me to come home, that you still think of me as your mother after everything I did. I am coming. I am leaving tomorrow morning. The journey will take 2 weeks, perhaps longer. I am not young anymore, and my health is not what it was. But I would crawl to Virginia on my hands and knees if it meant seeing your face again. I have so much to tell you, so much to explain, so much to ask forgiveness for. I know that Adelaide wrote to you. She told me in her last letter that she was going to make sure you knew the truth. I did not believe it was possible. I did not believe I deserved to be known. But here you are, my son, reaching across 20 years of silence to tell me that I am still loved. I will be there before the month is out. Wait for me, Henry. I have been waiting for you my whole life. Now it is your turn to wait for me. Your mother, Susanna. Clara set the letter down on the desk. Nathaniel was weeping. Not the quiet, controlled tears of a man who has learned to hide his grief. Real tears. The tears of a boy who had been 12 years old when his mother left and had spent 20 years believing it was his fault. Clara went to him. She put her arms around him and held him while he wept. She is coming, he said against her shoulder. She is really coming. Yes. I did not think she would. I thought she would be too afraid, too ashamed. She loves you, Nathaniel. She has always loved you. She just did not know how to come back. And now she does. Yes, now she does. He pulled back. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. His eyes were red, but there was something in them Clara had never seen before. Joy. I want you to be there when she arrives. I want you to stand beside me when I see her for the first time in 20 years. I will be there. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her again. Softer this time. Gentler. Clara Mercer, he said against her lips. You have given me back everything I thought I had lost. My home, my family, my hope. You gave it to yourself, Nathaniel. I only helped you see it. Then help me see one more thing. What? Help me believe that I deserve this. All of it. You, my mother, this second chance. Help me believe that I am not going to wake up tomorrow and find it was all a dream." Clara put her hand on his chest, over his heart, over the place where Adelaide's rose stitch was hidden inside the lining of his coat. "It is not a dream," she said. "It is your life, and you deserve every moment of it." The month passed slowly. Clara spent her days mending the small things that had been broken and neglected in Thornwood for 3 years. The torn pages in Adelaide's books, the frayed edges of the curtains in the library, the loose threads in the carpet on the main staircase. She spent her evenings with Nathaniel. They talked about everything. About Adelaide and what she had meant to both of them. About Margaret Mercer and the rose stitch and the letters that had traveled between Fredericksburg and Thornwood for 9 years. About the future they were building together, brick by brick, word by word. And every night before Clara went to bed, Nathaniel kissed her at the door of her workroom and told her he loved her. Every night she told him she loved him back. On the 23rd day after the letter arrived, a carriage came up the drive. Clara was in the garden cutting roses for the dining table when she heard the hooves on gravel. She straightened. She set down her shears. She walked to the front of the house. Nathaniel was already standing on the steps. His face was white. His hands were clenched at his sides. The carriage stopped. The door opened, and Susanna Thornwood stepped down onto the gravel drive of the house she had fled 20 years ago. She was smaller than Clara had imagined, thinner. Her hair was white, pulled back under a simple bonnet. Her dress was plain gray cotton, the dress of a woman who had lived modestly for 2 decades. But her eyes were Nathaniel's eyes, gray-blue, serious, filled with tears. "Henry," the word was barely a whisper. The voice of a woman who had been holding her breath for 20 years and was finally letting it out. Nathaniel did not move. He stood frozen on the steps, staring at the mother who had left him when he was 12 years old. Clara went to him. She put her hand on his arm. "Go," she said quietly. "Go to her." He looked at Clara. His eyes were wild, terrified. "I do not know if I can." "You can. You have been waiting for this moment your whole life. Do not let fear steal it from you." He nodded once. He walked down the steps. Susanna walked toward him. They met in the middle of the drive. For a long moment, they simply stood there looking at each other, mother and son. 20 years of silence between them. Then Susanna reached out. Her trembling hand touched Nathaniel's face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, the shape of his cheekbone, the curve of his brow. "My boy," she whispered. "My beautiful boy. You look just like your father, but you have my eyes." Nathaniel made a sound, a sob, a laugh, something in between. "Mother!" He pulled her into his arms. He held her the way a drowning man holds a rope. She held him back, her thin arms wrapped around his broad shoulders, her face pressed against his chest. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, weeping together, making up for 20 years of silence in a single embrace. Clara watched from the steps. Tears were running down her own face. She did not wipe them away. This was what Adelaide had wanted. This was what Margaret Mercer had kept those papers for. This was why Clara had traveled 3 days on a coach to a stranger's house with nothing but faith and a promise. This moment, this reunion, this family finally made whole. Nathaniel looked up at Clara over his mother's head. His face was wet. His eyes were bright. "Thank you," he mouthed. Clara smiled through her tears. "Welcome home," she whispered. The first week after Susanna's arrival was the hardest. Clara watched from a distance as mother and son circled each other like wounded animals learning to trust again. They took meals together in the dining room, but the conversation was careful, measured, full of silences that stretched too long. Nathaniel wanted to forgive. Clara could see it in his eyes every time he looked at his mother. But 20 years of believing he was the reason she left did not disappear in a single embrace on a gravel drive. On the 4th night, Clara found Susanna sitting alone in the garden at dusk, her thin hands folded in her lap, tears sliding down her cheeks. Clara sat down beside her without speaking. "He cannot look at me," Susanna whispered. "He tries, but I see it in his face. The questions he is afraid to ask, the anger he is afraid to feel. Give him time. I have given him 20 years of silence. How much more time does he need?" "As much as it takes." Clara turned to face the older woman. "Mrs. Thornwood, your son has spent 2 decades believing he was the reason you could not breathe in this house. He has spent 3 years drowning in grief for the woman who raised him after you left. He has just learned that his uncle stole 600 pounds from his family while he was too blind with sorrow to see it. He is not angry at you. He is angry at himself for needing you so badly after everything he has been through." Susanna's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because I know him. Because I have watched him read Adelaide's letters and weep. Because I have held him while he cried for the mother who left, and the mother who died, and the boy he used to be before the world taught him that love always ends in loss." "He told you about the morning I left?" "Yes." "He told you what I said to him? That he was the kindest person in this house?" "Yes." Susanna closed her eyes. More tears fell. "I should not have said that. I should have said I would come back. I should have promised him I would find a way to bring him with me, but I was so afraid. His father was a cruel man, Miss Mercer. A man who made me feel worthless every day of our marriage. A man who would have destroyed me if I had tried to take his son." "I know. Do you know what it is like to love someone so much that leaving them is the only way to save yourself? Do you know what it is like to walk away from your own child because staying would have killed you?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took Susanna's hand. "My grandmother raised me because my parents could not. They were not cruel. They were simply broken, too broken to care for a child. My grandmother told me once that sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is admit she cannot be what her child needs." She paused. "You left because you had to. You survived because you had to. And you came back because after 20 years you finally believed you might be strong enough to face what you left behind." Susanna gripped Clara's hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling. "Will he ever forgive me? He already has. He just does not know how to say it yet." That night, Clara went to Nathaniel's study. He was sitting at his desk with a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at nothing. The coat was draped over the chair beside him. He had finally taken it off. "Your mother thinks you hate her." He looked up. His eyes were red. "I do not hate her." "Then tell her that." "I do not know how." Clara crossed to him. She took the glass from his hand and set it on the desk. Then she knelt in front of his chair and put her hands on his knees. "Nathaniel, listen to me. You have spent your whole life learning how to hold things in, how to be still, how to keep your face from showing what you feel. Adelaide taught you that silence was safer than speaking. Your father taught you that love was something that could be taken away at any moment. But your mother did not leave because of who you were. She left because of who your father was, and she has spent 20 years paying for that choice. I know. Then stop punishing her for it. Stop punishing yourself for needing her. Go to her room right now, knock on her door and tell her that you are glad she came home." "What if I cannot?" "You can. You are this man who stood in front of Marcus Whitfield and told him the truth about what he had done. You are the man who read Adelaide's letter and wept and decided to find his mother after 20 years of silence. You are the man who told me he loved me in a rose garden and promised to marry me." Clara's voice softened. "You can do this, Nathaniel. You just have to choose to." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. He walked past her to the door. He stopped with his hand on the frame. "Clara." "Yes. Come with me." They went together. Susanna's room was at the end of the east wing, 3 doors down from the workroom where Clara had first found Adelaide's portrait. Nathaniel knocked twice, softly. The door opened. Susanna stood there in her nightgown, her white hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes still red from weeping. "Henry." "Mother." His voice cracked on the word. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I am glad you came home. I am glad you are here, and I forgive you. For leaving, for staying away, for all of it. He stepped forward. He took her hands in his. I have spent 20 years hating myself for driving you away. I cannot do it anymore. I am tired, Mother. I am so tired of carrying this weight. Susanna let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. My boy. My sweet foolish boy. You did not drive me away. You were the only thing that made me want to stay. Then why did you leave without me? Because your father would have destroyed us both if I had tried to take you. He told me the night before I left that if I ever tried to run with you, he would hunt us down and make sure I never saw you again. He said he would tell you I was dead. He said he would make you believe I had abandoned you on purpose. Nathaniel's face went white. He never told me that. Of course he did not. He told you I was a coward. He told you I left because I could not stand to be a mother anymore. He poisoned you against me, Henry, and I let him because I was too afraid to fight. You are not afraid anymore. No, I am not. Susanna reached up and touched his face. Adelaide gave me the courage to come back. She wrote to me for 3 years telling me about you, telling me how you were growing, telling me that you still asked about me sometimes when you thought no one was listening. I did. I know. And every letter she sent, every word she wrote made me believe that maybe someday I could see you again, that maybe you would not hate me forever. I never hated you, Mother. I only missed you. Susanna pulled him into her arms. They held each other in the doorway of her room, 20 years of silence finally breaking apart. Clara stood in the hallway and watched. She did not speak. She did not need to. Some moments belonged only to the people living them. The wedding was held in September. The village church was small white clapboard with a steeple that caught the morning light. Clara wore a dress she had made herself, ivory muslin, with a high waist and long sleeves, the hem embroidered with 12 small roses in the rose stitch her grandmother had taught her. Nathaniel wore the coat. The mended coat. He had not worn it since the night Clara first gave it back to him, but he wore it now. It seems right, he said when she asked him why. Adelaide made it for me. You mended it. It should be part of this day. There were only 6 guests. Mrs. Pratt, who wept through the entire ceremony. The cook and 2 housemaids who had known Clara for barely 2 months, but had already started calling her Miss Clara instead of Miss Mercer. And Susanna, who sat in the front pew with her hands folded in her lap and a smile on her face that Clara had never seen before, a smile of peace, of completion, of a woman who had finally come home. The minister spoke the words. Nathaniel and Clara spoke their vows. When it came time for the kiss, Nathaniel cupped her face in his hands and looked at her for a long moment before he bent his head. I love you, he whispered. I will love you until the day I die, and probably after. I know, she whispered back. I love you too. He kissed her. The minister pronounced them married. And Clara Mercer became Clara Thornwood in a small white church on a September morning, with the roses still blooming in the garden, and the woman who had waited 20 years to see her son, happy watching from the front pew. There was no grand celebration afterward. No ball, no feast, no procession through the village. There was only a quiet dinner in the dining room at Thornwood with good food and better company, and the kind of laughter that comes from people who have been through hard things together and come out the other side. That night, after the servants had gone to bed and Susanna had retired to her room, Nathaniel took Clara to the library. I have something for you. He led her to the old walnut writing desk that had once been Adelaide's. He opened the top drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. What is this? Open it. Clara opened the box. Inside, on a bed of faded velvet, lay a silver brooch in the shape of a rose. 6 petals, each one etched with a tiny line that looked almost like thread. Adelaide had it made for your grandmother, Nathaniel said quietly, 20 years ago when Margaret Mercer first came to work at Thornwood. She gave it to her as a gift, and your grandmother wore it every day for 15 years. When she left, Adelaide kept it hoping she would come back someday. Clara lifted the brooch from the box. Her hands were shaking. How do you know this? It was in the letter Adelaide wrote before she died. She said she wanted you to have it when you came. She said it belonged to your family. Clara pressed the brooch to her chest. The silver was cold against her skin, but it warmed quickly. the way things warm when they find where they are supposed to be. Thank you. Do not thank me. Thank Adelaide. Thank your grandmother. Thank the two women who spent 9 years writing letters back and forth, preparing for a day they believed would come even when no one else did. Clara pinned the brooch to her dress, just above her heart. I will wear it every day, she said, the way my grandmother did. Nathaniel smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and stayed there. I know you will. A year passed. The house changed in ways large and small. The shutters were repainted. The rose garden was tended with care. The crack in the front steps was finally repaired, filled in with new stone that matched the old. Susanna stayed. She took over the management of the household accounts, her sharp mind finally put to use after 20 years of exile. She caught errors that Clara had missed. She found inconsistencies that Mr. Crane had buried deep. She made Thornwood run more efficiently than it had in decades. Clara continued to mend. The curtains, the carpets, the books in the library with their cracked spines and torn pages. And sometimes in the evenings, she mended the people too. Mrs. Pratt, who still carried guilt for not seeing what Mr. Crane had been doing. The housemaids who had been afraid of their own master for 3 years and were only now learning that he was a man worth trusting. And Nathaniel. She mended him most of all. Not with needles, not with thread, but with patience and presence, and the kind of love that does not ask for anything in return. By the time the first anniversary of their wedding came around, Clara could hardly remember the man who had stood in his study doorway and told her to leave in the morning. That man was gone. In his place was someone new. Someone who laughed at dinner and walked in the garden with his mother and kissed his wife every morning before she opened her eyes. Someone who had been broken and had allowed himself to be mended. On their anniversary, Clara gave Nathaniel a gift. She did not wrap it. She did not present it at dinner. She simply took his hand in the library after Susanna had gone to bed and placed it on her stomach. What is this? A gift. The only gift I could think of that you do not already have. Nathaniel's face went blank. Then it went white. Then it went through so many expressions so quickly that Clara could not track them all. Clara, are you saying? I am saying that by spring there will be another Thornwood in this house. A child. Our child. He did not speak. He could not speak. He simply dropped to his knees in front of her, pressed his face against her stomach and wept. Clara put her hands on his hair. She held him while he cried. And she thought about all the mothers who had come before her. Her own mother who had been too broken to raise her. Her grandmother who had raised her anyway. Adelaide who had raised a boy who was not hers by blood and loved him as fiercely as any mother could. Susanna who had left her son to save herself and spent 20 years learning how to come back. All of them woven together. All of their choices leading to this moment. A woman with a child in her belly. A man on his knees. A house that had been waiting for 3 years and was finally full again. I am going to be a father, Nathaniel whispered against her stomach. Yes. I do not know how to be a father. You will learn, the way you learned everything else, one day at a time. He looked up at her. His face was wet. His eyes were bright. What if I fail? You will not fail. How do you know? Because you are the kindest person in this house, Nathaniel Thornwood. Your mother told you that 20 years ago, and it is still true. It will always be true. He stood up. He kissed her, and when he pulled back, he was smiling through his tears. I love you, Clara Thornwood. I know. I love you too. The baby was born in April, a girl, dark hair like her father, brown eyes like her mother, a cry so loud it woke Susanna 2 floors away. They named her Adelaide. Clara held her daughter for the first time and understood finally what her grandmother had meant when she said that some things can only be mended with time and patience and love. The rose stitch, the letters, the contract that had brought her to Thornwood. All of it had been leading to this moment. A mother holding a child. A family made whole. Nathaniel sat beside her on the bed, his hand on her shoulder, his eyes fixed on the tiny face of his daughter. She looks like Adelaide, he said quietly. "The Adelaide in the portrait. Something about her eyes. She has your chin. And your stubbornness, I can already tell." Clara laughed. It hurt, but she laughed anyway. "Good. She will need it." Susanna came to see the baby that afternoon. She held her granddaughter in her arms and wept the way she seemed to weep at everything now. Tears of joy. Tears of grief. Tears for all the years she had missed and all the years she had been given back. "She is beautiful," Susanna whispered. "She is perfect." "She is ours," Nathaniel said. "All of ours." And she was. 3 years later, on a summer afternoon, much like the one when Clara had first arrived at Thornwood, she sat in the library at the old walnut writing desk that had once been Adelaide's. The fire was unlit. The room was warm. Through the window, she could see the rose garden in full bloom, the canes heavy with flowers, the paths clean and tended. Little Adelaide was playing on the rug with a set of wooden blocks her father had carved for her. She was 3 years old now, with her father's serious eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. She looked up at Clara and smiled. "Mama, look!" She had built a tower, crooked and unsteady, but standing. "That is beautiful, sweetheart. It is a house, like our house." "It is." "Will it fall down?" Clara looked at the tower. At the blocks stacked carefully on top of each other. At the little hands that had placed them there. "No, my love, it will not fall down, not if you built it with care." The child smiled and went back to her blocks. Clara turned to the writing desk. She opened the drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. She dipped her pen in ink. She had been putting off this letter for weeks, but it was time. "Dear Mrs. Pratt," she wrote, "I am writing to inform you that Thornwood will require a new seamstress next spring. Not because I am leaving, but because I will be busy with other matters. Nathaniel and I are expecting our second child in March. If you know of anyone in the village who might be suitable, someone with patient hands and a good eye for detail, please send them to me. I will teach them the rose stitch myself. Yours, Clara Thornwood." She set down the pen. She looked at the portrait above the mantel. Adelaide in her wine-colored gown, with her roses embroidered along the hem. "Thank you," Clara whispered, "for believing I would come, for trusting me with your secrets, for loving your son enough to plan for his future from beyond the grave." The portrait did not answer, but Clara did not need it to. She had the rose garden. She had the mended coat. She had the silver brooch pinned above her heart. She had a daughter named Adelaide and a son on the way, and a husband who loved her more than she had ever believed possible. She had everything Adelaide had wanted her to have. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway. His hair was gray at the temples now, but his eyes were the same. Gray-blue, serious, warm. "Mrs. Thornwood." "Mr. Thornwood, your daughter has built a tower in the middle of the library and refuses to let anyone knock it down. Good, she takes after her father. She takes after her mother." He crossed to her. He bent down and kissed her forehead. Stubborn, determined, unwilling to let anything stay broken. Clara smiled. She put her hand on his cheek. "Some things are worth mending." "Yes." He turned his head and kissed her palm. "Some things are." Little Adelaide looked up from her blocks. "Papa, Mama, look. The tower is finished." They looked. The tower stood, crooked and imperfect but standing, the way all the best things stand. Clara Thornwood had come to this house to fulfill a promise to her dead grandmother. She had stayed because she found something worth staying for, and now, 3 years later, she understood what Adelaide had known all along. That love is not a feeling. It is a choice, made again and again, day after day, stitch by stitch, and some stitches once tied can never be undone.